Hey, John Ty here, and welcome to the Self-Publishing Summit. Got a great guest for you today. He's the CEO of Cote and Associates, a consulting firm he founded to create growth strategies, story-based marketing campaigns, and systems to engage customers. He's an award-winning author who's published 3 Amazon #1 best-selling books. He's also the creator and host of Healthcare Elsewhere, the world's leading medical tourism podcast, and in 2014, he published an international best-selling book based on the show, also titled Healthcare Elsewhere. And recently, he's launched authorauthorityacademy.com to help busy professionals and entrepreneurs write and publish a best-selling book in 8 weeks, something he's very qualified to do. So I'd like to welcome our guest today, John Cote. John, welcome to the Self-Publishing Summit.
Hey, John, thanks very much. I really appreciate you having me out for the summit. This is fantastic.
Well, it's great to chat to you. And we met originally through, I think, Podcasters Paradise. We've also been to some of Mike Koenig's events. So great to have you on the show. You've done lots of really cool stuff. That little intro I gave was really just a tiny flavor of some of the stuff you've done. Could you just start perhaps by giving us an overview really of the Healthcare Elsewhere project, for want of a better name, because there's so much that's gone into that. Give us a little bit of a framework, and then we can dig into some of the things that you've done there.
Yeah, sure. So the thing that was really the most fun about it, or kind of surprising about it, was I'm not a medical tourism expert at all. And for those of you who don't know what medical tourism is, don't feel bad. I didn't either when they first called me and wanted me to come and speak at their conference. But basically what medical tourism is when you travel to another country to get medical care because it's less expensive or you can't get it in your country or whatever the issue is. Okay, so there's millions of people around the world who actually travel to do this. So about a year and a half ago, I got a call from a woman who is the organizer of the world's leading and largest medical tourism conference and said, hey, we were looking for a speaker to talk about marketing. And I typed the words word of mouth advertising speaker into Google, and we found your logo, your link to your Amazon book, right? So, or on Amazon to your book. So this was the first book I had written a couple of years ago. It's called Mobilize Your Customers. And it's just a short, like 110-page marketing book for local business owners. And they found that, they liked the content in it, and they booked me for this, to speak at this event. And I said, great. So can you tell me what medical tourism is when, we were explaining all this? That was kind of funny. But so she told me what it was all about. And it was at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, big, huge venue, 2,000 attendees. So it was great. I put together a custom presentation for them and did the whole thing. Had a fantastic time. And one of the things that I mentioned was that podcasting was really taking off right now. And it was something that should take a look at, because if you went to iTunes and typed in medical tourism, nothing came up. There were no shows about medical tourism at all. And you could totally own the space. And it would be a great way to tell your story and the story of your patients and get that out there and get people to, to connect with you. So everyone thought that was a great idea. I gave away 200 copies of my book at that conference. We got clients out of it. It was fantastic. But no one took action on that podcasting idea. So about exactly 1 year ago, it's April 20th today. This was April 21st of last year. We launched our podcast in February of last year. We decided, hey, we're going to launch a show based, about medical tourism. I want it to be a world-class show. I want to be able to launch it in 10 weeks, and we need to be able to monetize it within a year. And we were able to accomplish all of those things. So that was kind of the genesis of how Healthcare Elsewhere started as a podcast.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So it started from the book led to the conference, that led to the idea. You're the one that took action. With things that within the communities that we're involved in, some of the young men are doing just taking action. And then obviously, we'll come to the healthcare book later, but. To the first book and
yeah, you were breaking up there a little bit. It sounded like you're asking me about the first book, Mobilize Your Customers, and the whole point of that. So I'll start with that and just basically say that when at the time I had my marketing agency, and we were mostly doing just social media marketing, and that was working out fine. But more and more agencies were figuring out how to do social media marketing, and the prices that I was able to charge started going down, and so there was competition. And I just didn't want to get into a race to the bottom for price. I thought my services were worth more than that, so I decided I needed to figure out a way to differentiate myself from everybody else. And so I decided to go ahead and write this book, Mobilize Your Customers. And the reason that I did it, I had had a book in my head for a couple of years because I was speaking at Chamber of Commerce events and business networking events. And I always kept getting the same questions over and over and over again from people afterwards after I would speak. So I said, all right, great. How about if I write a book that answers those questions? And, that way I can just hand them the book and say, well, here's the answers to all of your questions. And that was kind of the genesis and start of that. And what was cool about it was I was at a conference and I heard a guy named Paul Colligan who got up and spoke on stage and talked about how he created a Kindle #1 bestseller or on Amazon, and he did it by speaking into his microphone. So that's how I created all of my books now. Basically, it's by me talking into a microphone on my phone or on this mic or whatever. I put the concept out there, we get it edited and convert it into a book, and that's how we do it. So we're able to create books very, very quickly and get them to market and run them through a launch process to get them to #1. And so that's worked really well for us to help, both our business, and now we're starting to help other people's business with that same concept.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, two really good things out of that. One is the idea of being able to create a book really quickly. I know a lot of people get hung up on the idea of a book, thinking it's got to take months or years even to do. But dictating it, and there's two ways. For the benefit of anybody who's not been through this process, you can dictate and use software. I use Dragon Naturally Speaking, and I'm a pretty good typist. I'm a 60 word per minute typist, but I can talk a lot faster than I can type. And even if it doesn't get it perfect, it's still way quicker. It's like, I've also created books, which I know Paul's done as well, which are interview based, and an hour-long interview is about a 10,000 word transcript. Or you can just dictate and have somebody transcribe that for you and then bring in the editors in like you described. So it's a very quick way of creating content. You can still have it edited and proofread and all that sort of stuff to really tidy it up so it doesn't sound like it's just been spoken. So it can be nicely polished and professional. So that's really good. And the other point I like, which is something that I talk about, and my podcast, Publish, Position, Profit, the positioning part is all about what you just described, which is that avoiding that race to the bottom. And for me, it came from the fact that my first business, it was in a very commoditized industry, and I wasn't able to do a good enough job of communicating the value that we were providing. And so that's what got me wanting to learn about the positioning side and really take it much more seriously to avoid that ever happening again. And it's a great, anybody who's listening who either has a business or is thinking about a business, having a book as a positioning tool to avoid that commoditization trap, and lots of other things that a book does as well in terms of giving you credibility and generating leads and all sorts of really good stuff like that. Very, very powerful. So a couple of great things there. And so going back to healthcare elsewhere, I know that a lot of elements went into making that so successful so quickly. So perhaps we can go back to that. And I think that'd be useful for people to listen to the different things, how the podcast tied in with the book and the social media and all the different things that you did to make that work so well.
Sure. So in a nutshell, what we did, and when I say my team, really what I mean is my outsourced team. I mean, I came up with this concept and, said, all right, so we want to have a medical tourism show that's basically interviewing, because I'm not an expert. So I need to interview the experts and the patients. And we've all probably, if you're an entrepreneur, you've heard of John Lee Dumas, an entrepreneur on fire. He's been wildly successful. That's where I learned how to podcast. So I didn't know how to podcast. I had never really done any interviews, but I didn't let that stop me. I just went ahead and, hey, I went and got his course. I learned real quickly what I needed to do. I bought some equipment and I went off and got it done. And so, the goal was to, get a bunch of interviews in the can and ready to go. So we took the lead capture, the list that I had built at the speaking engagement at Caesar's Palace. We had when I was on stage, I said, hey, text your name and email to this number and you'll get all of my keynote slides. So I had a list of people who were in the industry. I texted them or emailed them and said, hey, we're doing this show and I would love to interview you and feature you on our show. And I would love to interview some of your patients as well. So that's where we got our initial 30 or 40 or so people that we interviewed on the show. So we started doing interviews. We started doing the logo concept and everything. We used 99 designs, put that all together, took a week or two, came up with the name and all that stuff. So, all of that part of it that you can spend months and months and months on, don't waste your time on that. Come up with an idea, get the concept together, and go and just move forward with it. Don't waste your time on, making everything perfect. Perfect is the enemy of success, I think, in this case, because we went out with a product that was probably about 80% ready. But I set a date. I said, April 21st, we're launching in 10 weeks. I don't care how many episodes I got or whatever, we're going to do it. And that's exactly what we did. And we had the goal in mind initially too, and said, all right, we're going to take this, the podcast, and we were going to do it as a daily show for 2 months because I wanted to create a lot of content that I could use the best episodes from to create a book. So we had that in mind right from the get-go to go ahead and do that. And that's exactly what we did. And so that's what we used. We basically made, I don't know if you can see that with the glare and everything, but we made this book. And this is a hardcover edition. I'll tell you why we did a hardcover edition as well. That worked out as an authority piece really, really well later in the year for us.
Great. With the so you did 2 months of basically a daily show to get out content. I because to say it's a great book, bringing experts on different areas of the subject. So how many interviews did you take pieces from different interviews, or did you take whole interviews and make one interview a chapter? How did that work out?
Yeah, what I ended up doing with this particular one was we made a chapter out of an interview. So we picked the top, I think it was about 13 or 14 interviews. That to me, when I say top, I mean, they were the most compelling story-wise, because story is everything when you're doing something like this. In marketing, I think that, we need to spend more time on creating compelling content that people are actually really interested in hearing, not just our sales pitch about whatever it is we're trying to sell, right? So I wanted to have stories that were really kind of that Oprah moment, almost it's very heart-wrenching and just, wow, I can't believe, like our very first interview that we broadcast in the first chapter in the book is a woman named Holly Huber, and she had MS, and her doctors in the United States said, well, look, we're sorry, there's nothing else we can do for you. We've done all of the legal FDA-approved treatments, but there's nothing else we can do for you. You're probably going to be in a wheelchair in about a year, and you probably won't be able to speak coherently within another year or two after that. And she refused to accept that. So she started doing the research, and she ended up going down to Panama and Costa Rica to get stem cell therapies. That was very experimental, highly controversial at the time. Now it's much more common now. But she went down there and got that treatment. And what it did was it basically it didn't cure her of MS, but it stopped the progression to the point where she's not in a wheelchair. She lives a full life. She has her own company. And it was just really a compelling story that worked very, very well. So we took the top 13 or 14 most compelling episodes and had them transcribed and then turned into the book. And of course, we edited them and everything else. But we went from the time that I said go to the time that I had this book in my hand was about 3 weeks. Yeah, John, you're breaking up a little bit. I lost a little bit of the question there, but I'll just kind of continue on that same thought with the book. One of the things that we did with it to use as an authority piece was I was invited back to speak again at that same conference. It was in Washington, D.C. this past year in 2014. So it was in September. And so we set it up knowing that, and we kind of backed it up and said, okay, I need to have the book published by such and such date. So we need to have so many episodes done so we can get this thing published. And so we put it on Kindle, of course, and basically it's available everywhere books are sold. We used a company called BookBaby to give us global distribution, but we also used them to create a hardcover edition. And then we got our softcover editions created through CreateSpace, an Amazon company, which I'm sure most who are doing this kind of thing are familiar with. And so the point of doing the hardcover editions was we gave away some softcover editions after I spoke at that event. But one of the gentlemen who was there is the chairman of the board of a large company that's basically putting together a massive medical tourism city here in the Western Hemisphere, in somewhere in Central or South America. I can't disclose the location yet. I had to sign an NDA and all that, but they're going to announce it. The government's going to announce it here shortly. When they do, I'll be happy to update you on that. But in any case, what ended up happening was he loved the story that I had and the concept of book publishing to get your story out there. And he wanted us to help their doctors and professionals to create their own books to help promote their medical tourism city. So they flew my wife and I down there to their location to meet with the board of directors and talk with everyone and kind of show them what we could do. And so that's led to a massive, just a great relationship with these folks, to the point now where it's been 6 months we've been doing and working with them. They actually offered me a seat on their board of advisors. So having that #1 best-selling book and being able to hand out, these hardcover editions that I personally signed and put my cell phone number into to all the board of directors members was a really big deal, and really gave the extra authority I needed to help show them that, yes, this is something that I can do for you as well. And they just absolutely loved it. Yeah, again, I apologize, John. I'm losing the audio on my end. I know we had tested this before and everything was working okay, so I didn't really hear most of what you had said. I apologize.
Okay.
But I'll throw this little tidbit out until, actually, I think I might have you here again now. Can you say something real quick?
Yeah, so I'll break it down. I'll make it shorter. So I want to touch on the book launch and how you got that to be #1 bestseller, first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched the podcast and the books pretty much the same way. At the time, I didn't really have any expertise on Facebook advertising. So I hired an expert and said, hey, what I want to do is I'm going to create a page that is going to promote healthcare elsewhere. So we created that. And 3 weeks before the podcast, she went out and basically created a like campaign. And I had my virtual assistant start posting articles and links and things like that on there and getting engagement going on. And so we had, at the time, you used to be able to show, they'd show you how many people were engaging with the page and everything. And it was working great. We actually had more people engaging with the page than actually had liked the page. And we got it to the point where we had around, 3,000 likes or something like that. And then we told those people, hey, we're about to launch this podcast. It's coming. Here's the date. I gave them a couple of sample excerpts of a couple of episodes. We also sent out to the email list that I had built from my speaking engagement on stage at the Medical Tourism Conference. And so we leveraged all of that, put it all together and said, hey, April 21st is the day. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and launch this thing. And it worked fantastically well. So doing that like campaign and generating interest by talking with some of the people that we interviewed, having them put a few blurbs on there, putting some interesting articles and those things helped to get it to the point where we launched at #1 in our category. It was health and medicine or something like that on iTunes on day one. And so we were in new and noteworthy. We were up there at the top, usually #1 or 1 through 5 or so, that whole first 8 weeks that we were being featured, which was fantastic. And it really worked well. And then for the book, we basically did the same thing, same process. We went through all the people who had been listening to the show. We started talking about it on the show. Hey, the book's going to be coming out shortly. You can get your Kindle version for 99 cents. We're launching on a specific day so that we can get the maximum number of sales so that we'll hit #1. And we wanted to try and make it an international bestseller as well, since it's a global audience. And we were able to successfully do that. It worked out fantastically.
Good. So you had a lot of stuff going on Facebook to build engagement. And I think having a an interview-based book where you've got multiple contributors effectively is helpful in that respect, because it means you can have them come in and contribute stuff and help share the message as well, which is really good.
Yeah.
And what about other social media sites? You use Facebook. Did you use any others? And were you able to tell what was going to be the most traction?
Yeah. Initially, we just focused on Facebook, but we did eventually, because there was so much involved with putting it all together and doing the launch and everything. But we believe in the you everywhere now concept. If someone likes to be on Pinterest, then we want to be there. So we ended up creating social media profiles on all the major, social media. We had Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, I think I just said Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and Tumblr. And so we were putting posts out there, and we didn't really get a whole lot of traction on the non-paid advertising other than Twitter. Twitter actually worked pretty well for us. That drove a lot of traffic for us because we were tweeting out episode links and things like that, and with compelling, just kind of little blurbs from the headline of whatever it was that we were broadcasting that day. And we would do some of the back catalog episodes as well with I did some hashtag keyword research to figure out, well, if you did hashtag medical tourism, that's extremely relevant, but nobody's looking for that. There were very few hits on that every day on Twitter. So instead, we would do things like healthcare and different things like that were related, but were much more popular. And that helped us to drive the traffic quite a bit on the show with Twitter.
Yeah. One of the great things about Twitter, which you don't have with, say, Facebook, is that you can use hashtags to get people who are not necessarily, following you to see it when they search using those hashtags. And so that can be a very powerful strategy. And of course, you want to have that compelling headline too. Yep. And so I'm just thinking, so with the book launch, I don't know if you can answer this question, but how much of the success with the podcast, how much did that help with the book launch in terms of having that as a sort of platform to leverage at the same time as you were launching the book?
Yeah. I think it helped quite a bit. It's hard to say. I didn't really have specific tracking in place to see where all the traffic was coming from. But I know that, we have a lot of listeners who are very passionate about the show. I was at Podcast Movement last year in Dallas, and I was on the bus coming back from one of the evening events or something like that. And all of a sudden, this woman turns on and she says, "Oh my God, it's John Cote from Healthcare Elsewhere." And I was like, what? It was just so random and out of nowhere. And she was with a couple of friends. "Hey, this is that guy I was telling you about on the show, Healthcare Elsewhere." And so they recognized my voice because they heard me talking to my wife, which was the funny part of it. But what we found was that we do have a small but passionate fan base of people who are very into the show and really like to hear the stories. And we get emails from them, and they comment on Facebook every once in a while and on Twitter and stuff. And so they were all very much about, hey, they went out, our power users went out, and they were tweeting the link out, hey, buy this book for 99 cents, help it be a #1 international bestseller and everything. But we also had, the like campaign going. We had a paid campaign going to a degree. And then I hit my email list, and the publishing group that I belong to also, we all help each other out with promoting each other's books and things like that as well. So I really think the podcast helped quite a bit, but it's hard to say exactly how much compared to one of my regular book launches where we don't have a podcast to leverage. Yeah.
It's very interesting. And, what I would say for everybody listening is that the great thing about a podcast is it's free. It's a free way of getting your message out there and building up a listenership. You go on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud. There's lots of platforms that you can use. And most of them are free to be on. And so it's certainly something to be thinking about, both from a business building point of view, but very much also from a platform building point of view. And it's certainly one of the reasons that I went into podcasting. It's also fantastic networking, so you get to interview some really cool people as well. Oh, yeah. So yeah, totally with you on that. And so since then, you've told us already a little bit about some of the really good things that have been happening as a result of the book and the podcast, Healthcare Elsewhere. Mm-hmm. You've got the new program, which is Authority Academy, right? Which is to help entrepreneurs and people actually create a book. And you've got effectively a system that you take people through. let's have a little chat about that, because I think that would be very interesting to people, how that process works.
Sure. So, one of the things that we offered as a full service agency, specifically for like in the medical tourism arena, we had doctors and other large organizations coming to us and saying, hey, we want to do this, but we don't want to go find a publisher and all this stuff. We understand the model. This is great. We just want you to do it. They wanted a done for you service. They wanted me to just interview the professional and create the book, and they didn't want to have to really deal with it at all. And so that was great, and that's fine, but that's a high ticket item to do something like that. And so we wanted to have something that would be more attainable and reachable for the average entrepreneur who is trying to use a book as an authority piece to help grow their business. And so, we looked at, well, what's the minimum amount we could charge, and to do it as a one-off, even if we were having them do some of the work, the numbers were just getting bigger than I wanted to charge. So we said, all right, well, how about if we look at doing this in a small group environment where instead of we just build a course, because there's plenty of people who sell publishing courses, you can learn how to publish a book, and they cost anywhere from, a couple of $100s up to, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000 or something. And some of them are really, really good. There's great content. And for the business owner who has the time and the discipline to do it themselves, that's fantastic. But, most of us know when you see those kinds of courses, for the most part, like 95 or 97% of the people who buy them never actually accomplish what they're going to do. Now, some of the guys out there have had some great successes. I've seen as many as 50% complete a book on some of the different publishing courses that have come out lately, which is fantastic. But what we found was we were having more and more people come to me and ask questions after speaking engagements and wondering about, could they really do what I said that I did, basically create a book like Healthcare Elsewhere. We did that in 3 weeks from the time that we said, okay, go. We took, obviously I did the interviews and I had the content, but if you already had content, you could do this, in a couple of weeks, no problem. Yeah. And, I get people, they're kind of skeptical about that. And they're like, really, you can go out and do that? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So what we decided to do is create a course where you've got 12 highly motivated entrepreneurs who want to get together. And basically we have kind of a closed group, a mastermind group. There's very short focused video training, and twice a week we meet on the phone or via webinar, basically to go over, hey, what's hanging you up? What are you getting stuck on? And let's get you unstuck. And we provide them all the outsourced materials and people and connections so that they don't have to worry about, well, where am I going to get it edited? Where am I going to get this? Where am I going to get that? We take care of providing all of the connections that they need to get that done. And at the end of the 8 weeks, then everybody then graduates with their #1 best-selling book. As long as they follow the course, they'll get done and move that out there. So that's kind of what the whole course was about. We've gotten some great response from that.
That's great. And I think that mastermind environment helps. And it's something that's come up a few times over the course of the summit. And it comes up on the podcast as well in a different context. But with writing a book, I think having people around you, whether you decide to join something like John's group and work with John, or whether you find some like-minded people through social media or something like that, or having that kind of support network to get you over the sticking points, maybe people who've done it before, or just motivate you when you're not not feeling so motivated.
That's right.
It's really, really powerful. It can really make the difference between success and failure, especially having you don't want to let the group down. You want to be being held accountable. It's all good. And with your experience, John, with both doing the sort of the done for you side of things, but also this mastermind group type stuff where I suppose small elite group coaching, really.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you find are the typical sticking points for people? What are the things that they need to overcome most?
I think initially the content can be overwhelming for them to sit there and go, well, like, for example, I talk about how in Mobilize Your Customers, I spoke into my microphone for 8 hours. That seems like a lot. Now, I didn't sit down at one time and do that. I just turned the mic on while I was driving home from the airport for 2 hours. And I had a general concept in my mind of what I wanted to create as far as some chapters. And I just started talking about exactly as if I was answering questions. So I came up with this format. Well, I didn't come up with it. Someone else taught it to me. Mike Koenigs did. He's one of your guests here on the show, the 10 by 10 idea, where basically you come up with 10 frequently asked questions and 10 should ask questions that people who are not experts should be asking but don't know enough to ask. And so I started asking and answering those questions on the interview. And then I did a couple of round trips to the airport. Next thing you know, I had 8 hours worth of material. That turned into about 28,000 words in about a 115-page book. So for Healthcare Elsewhere, that was more like in the, I forget, it was around 70 or 80,000 words, and it turned into about a 280-page book. If you look around in your office and on your in your content, I'm sure you have blog posts, interviews, YouTube videos, keynote presentations. There's all kinds of content that you already have around that are related to your expertise that you could use and leverage to create some of this content. And even if you didn't, then just sit down and just start talking. I've had a few people that said, I don't want to talk, I just want to type. I like the whole concept of typing. And I tell them that's fine if you want to do that, but I can talk like 5 times faster than you can type. So it's up to you, but I expect you to keep up with the class. So that's the first thing is, they feel overwhelmed by the content, but once they get started and they realize what their expert, how quickly they can put this out, it goes pretty quickly. And then the other big thing is editing. They get really concerned about that because you can spend a lot of time on that. And I'm like, look, you can hire professionals to do that for you and not have to worry about it. For example, I had one gent who had written his own book. It wasn't one of my clients, but he told me this great story. He hired someone on Elance, and she turned out to be a Harvard graduate with an English degree. She was between jobs, and she was just looking to edit some books for some extra cash. And she edited his entire book. It was like 180 or 200 pages. And I think she did it for like $300. I mean, why wouldn't you do that, right? I mean, you think of the value of your time. Even if you had a year to edit that book, you could not edit it as well as I'm sure this woman did as a Harvard English major. And so he said she provided great value to the book, really tightened it up, made it a great book, and it was $300. So you can absolutely outsource this stuff and get it done and get it taken care of quickly. So you don't have to do all the work. That's the point. So if you're going to do this yourself, do it yourself, I think, is a misnomer. Do it with outsource help. Let other people do the heavy lifting for you, and you just handle the creative side of it. And, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
Two really good things there, the content creation and the editing. And on just a couple of things I want to touch on the content side, I'm just looking down my notes here, is that typing versus speaking thing. And I can empathize with that because I used to think I prefer typing. I like that process. And I was reluctant to, I mentioned earlier that I use Dragon Naturally Speaking. There's a PC version, there's a Mac version, and I love it. It's a great piece of software. Not perfect, but it's still really, really useful. Now that I've got used to it, I would have started using it much sooner, but I had that idea in my head that I'd like to type. So for anybody who's thinking that, it is so much quicker to speak than it is to write. And once you get into the flow, once you get used to it, it doesn't take that long. You'll thank me for this. So that's the first thing I want to say.
I'll throw out this tip too, John, is what I tell people. And this isn't anything new, but turn everything off. Turn your, whatever you use your one program, whatever it is you're doing to speak into, but turn everything else off, all your notifications, all your social media, lock yourself away in a room, away from your wife and kids or husband, kids, whatever. Just get yourself into a zone where you can be quiet and thoughtful and just do it. And you'll find that it goes very quickly. For me, that happened to be my first book. It was in the car. It was actually, I just set the thing into the phone stand and I turned the recorder on and I just started talking. And then I sent it out to be transcribed. Then I told my transcriber, look, I want you to take out all the ums and ahs. And occasionally I'll say, okay, for the editor, please put this next segment at the beginning or after this segment or whatever, if I thought of something. And so they would help me do some of the editing and formatting right on the fly. And, again, the formatting of that stuff or the transcription of that stuff didn't cost it was under $200 to get the entire thing transcribed. I think the first book, I think I looked at, I think it was about $350 for me to create that entire first book. It was almost nothing. Healthcare Elsewhere cost more because it was higher production value, but still, you can do all this stuff yourself and take a long time and try and get it perfect and maybe get it launched in 6 months to a year, or you can move forward, get it outsourced, get things done and get it done in 8 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, $350 is crazy. When you think of the value that's created, not just for you and your business, but also for the people who've been able to read that and get the ideas and insights and inspiration from that. Very, 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 very good at $350. I was going to share a quick story as well, which is, and you may have heard this before, but if you're listening, but when I wrote my second book, I was still practicing as a corporate lawyer at the time. And so I was typically, just because basically, cut a long story short, there was a new piece of legislation coming into the UK. And so all these deals had to be done before a particular deadline when the legislation changed. So the earliest I was getting out of the office was 10 p.m. And then I had to commute home and eat and stuff like that.
Right.
So it was some pretty long days. And but I wanted to get this book written. And it was a book about weight loss, nutrition, and healthy diet, basically, because I'd been a fitness instructor, personal trainer, nutritionist before I became a lawyer. And so I didn't have a lot of time, but what I did do was spend a little bit of time. I just made a discipline, a habit, whatever you want to call it, of spending some time each day, even if it was only 10 minutes, even if I only got a paragraph written. And then at the weekends, if I had a bit of extra time, I'd do a couple of hours or however long I had. But that grew. And over the course of, if I remember, it was about 4 months it took me. But at the end of 4 months, I had a 50, 60,000 word book. And
Excellent.
so, if you're listening to this and you think, I don't have time, again, just create that little bit of time each day. If you've got more time, great. But just have that discipline of doing a little bit, and it will get done eventually. And
yeah, John, let me throw something in real quick to a good friend of mine. I was in the Marine Corps, United States Marine Corps. And so we like checklists and discipline and all that other good stuff, right? And even as an entrepreneur, I follow a lot of those things. But hey, we all get to the point where we're busy with life. I've got a wife. I've got 3 teenage children. I've got my business. I'm traveling. I'm speaking. Hey, we're all busy. Okay. So what this, a good friend of mine who's also a Marine and he's a business coach, he's one of my coaches, he said this, and it really stuck with me. And I say this to people all the time. When people say, I don't have the time, what they really mean is I don't have the discipline. And what I'm specifically talking about is that if it was important enough to you, if your life depended on it, you would absolutely get it done. So you have not made it a priority in your life. So if it is important enough to you, then make a priority in your life and make it happen. Have the discipline to make it happen. And just like you said, John, just go out there and set aside a little bit of time every day and keep moving forward on that process.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing, like with our course, it's 8 weeks. Yeah, but we're not looking to say, oh, and you have to give up 8 weeks of your life to do this. No, it's focused attention for an hour or two every day. And you go, well, where am I going to find the time to do that? Well, have the discipline and give something else up. You don't need to be watching all that reality TV and all that other good stuff. Don't give up time with your family.
That's not good.
You need to spend time with your family, right? But don't, give up all that TV for 8 weeks and get your book done.
Yeah. And that discipline you talked about, I mean, that comes down to, personal development, self-development. That's fine. Your why. What's the reason for this? You'll find a strong enough reason to do it. You'll find it, and also you made this terrible distractions thing I teach as well, which I think is really important, is having focused time, so that you can get into a state of flow and really be, get more done in 1 hour than somebody else might get done in 3 or 4 hours because you haven't got any messages coming in. Nobody's knocking on the door. Nobody's saying, oh, can I have a minute? And it's just you doing that thing, and everybody around you, you've taught them that when you're doing the book, whatever it is, or running a business, you're not to be disturbed because that and that can make a huge difference and really leverage the time that you have. Good.
Yep.
So
there's huge benefits to that too. I mean, with regard to, just real quick, I mean, for example, I mentioned Paul Colligan. He's very well known in the YouTube and podcasting space. He's been around forever. He's written tons of books. And with the success that I had with Healthcare Elsewhere, he had a new book that came out, How to Podcast 2015. And he invited people to write some of the chapters for him, right? So this was a brilliant strategy on his part, just like I had done with my book. I didn't actually write the book. I just interviewed people and used that as my source material. So Paul wrote about probably half the book, and then he had guest authors like myself write the other half. He invited me and said, hey, your success story is really good. I'd love for you to talk about Healthcare Elsewhere, and we'll give you a segment in the book to write about that. So I did about 10 pages for him. And now when you go to my Amazon author page, if you're not familiar with that, by the way, if you are an author and you're on Amazon and you haven't set it up, go set it up right now, because that is Google search gold right there.
it is,
And if you're looking at becoming an author, that's something you can do. So what it does is it lists all of your books. So that's listed under my books as a co-author. Paul went in and made me a co-author of the book because I contributed to it. So again, just another authority piece that comes along with that.
Yeah. So, go back to what you were talking about earlier, having Amazon author page, which is free to set up, and having your page on Amazon. Amazon ranks so well on Google. You're near the top of Google those sites. Maybe especially doesn't do keyword research. You don't necessarily look like getting found to speak to the medical practice, and that led to healthcare elsewhere and all the other things. So, yeah, again, something else not to underestimate is the power of you being able to leverage Amazon to get to the top of the Google rankings.
Yeah,
and get your
yeah,
business
and that's
up
how
there.
I got that speaking gig. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, I think it's great the way everything ties in together. And obviously, you've got to put the work in. But I think we're incredibly lucky. I feel very genuinely privileged to be living at this time where we have all these things. We can set up a podcast. Yeah, okay, you can spend some money on some decent equipment, but you can get started for $100, $100. And the podcast is free. Books published on Amazon, distributed worldwide, maybe distributed on different platforms. Get hardware made. Get out on social media, build the platform, build the network, build your advocates and your evangelists, and all of this stuff is essentially free. Now, the bit that costs you money is you got to put the time in. Time isn't really
that's true.
free.
Yeah,
but we're so lucky, I think, to go through all these great things. I think you're a fantastic example, John. Somebody who's really taken the stuff from.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And, another point too that you brought up that's interesting, you talk about the platform, like we talked about in the podcast, You Everywhere Now. We want to be in as many places as we can. So when we launched the podcast, we started out on iTunes, but now we're on, like you talked about, Stitcher Radio, Spreaker, and I don't know, we're on about a dozen different podcasting platforms. We're all over the place so that people can find us. And, that's worked fantastically well. But like going back to mobilize your customers, we actually went out and used ACX, which is also an Amazon company now. That's basically Audible. That's where you get your audiobooks done. So you can, we get partnered with a voice artist on Audible who agreed to take 50% of all the revenue off the book. So we get, I forget what the number is. It's like 57% or something like that is the amount that we get whenever we sell one of those audiobooks. And then he and I split that revenue evenly. Now, we're not making a ton of money off of that, but I think I'm still selling like 10 to 15 of those every month. Every couple of days, we sell another one of those. And that's another person who has bought our book or bought my book, listened to it in their car or wherever, and connected with me. And some of those people have reached out and asked me for follow-on consultations and things like this. So, if you type my name into Amazon, Google, iTunes, wherever, it pretty much shows up with a variety of different things for marketing, for healthcare, and for authorship, and all this other stuff. And it's over time, you just keep building on this, and it gets to the point where you literally are everywhere online.
Yeah, it's exciting times. That's what I like to say.
Yeah,
Very exciting.
Sure
times.
is.
Yeah. So, John, I mean, tremendously interesting stuff that great things that you did, and some great insights there. Before we wrap things up, just tell us, how can people follow up with you, either the healthcare elsewhere side of things, or Author Authority Academy, if they want to get into the creating a book in 8 weeks? Where should people go?
So for Healthcare Elsewhere, you can just go to healthcareelsewhere.com. We have a website there that has all of the episodes. We've gotten, I think, about 105 or 106 episodes to date. We've had about 1.7 million downloads. It's been great. We appreciate all of your support. And if you're someone who is looking for interesting, there's a search bar on there. Maybe you're interested in finding out about hip replacement surgery or dental work. And we've interviewed people from all over the world, and you can find out more about how people are using this and doing this. And our goal with the podcast is to educate people and let them know, hey, you have choices. There's options out there. If it's too expensive or your insurance doesn't cover it or whatever, you've got ways that you can get out there and do it. So, of course, and again, like I said, we're on just about every podcasting platform out there. So you can type in the name of the show or my name and it'll pop up. And then for Author Authority Academy, if you just go to authorauthorityacademy.com, there's an opt-in box there to get your email. And basically, there's a webinar that you can sign up for. And it's just a short 40-minute webinar or so where I run through the, how I did it. And more detail about what we talked about today, how I leveraged, healthcare elsewhere in my books to create the business, that we have now and everything, and to try and help people. And so we run through a 15-point checklist of exactly how I did it. So you'll get the entire checklist of how I went ahead and created this book, so you can do it yourself and figure that out from there. So that's at authorauthorityacademy.com.
Fantastic. So, John, just a big thank you, two big thank yous. One, for coming on the Self-Publishing Summit and being a guest, and two, for giving us so many really good insights into the processes that you've been following and having such enormous success with. So, John, thanks so much for coming on.
John, hey, I really appreciate the invitation. I was really glad when I got the invite back from you and everything. This is something that was kind of on my calendar. I said, hey, that would be really cool. I'd love to get on your summit, because I knew what a great platform you were putting together, and I know some of the people that were speaking, and I was like, this is going to be massive. I really would love to be involved with this. So I really appreciate you having me on the summit and interviewing me today.
Thanks, John. It's been great catching up. Cheers. Bye.
All right. Have a good one.